To the Point with Michael Williams.
Good morning. It's the biggest district seat in the biggest county by area in Florida, District 6 in Palm Beach County. Shaded in beige on this map, it includes Wellington, Royal Palm Beach, Loxahatchee Groves, part of Green Acres there, out to Pahokee and Belle Glade. The issues, in many ways, mirror those you see in your own community, wherever you live in our five-county area. The need for affordable housing, the debate over growth, development, and quality of life, regulation, you name it. Two candidates will square off in the November general election. Democrat Michelle McGovern. We'll talk with her next week. Today, my guest, Republican Sara Baxter, who was unopposed. So our first chance to sit down with you, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Your campaign website, second generation Floridian, it says, wife, mom, businesswoman, a varied career. Tell us a little more about who you are and why you're running.
Well, as you said, yes, wife, mother, small business owner. My husband and I grew a small business from the ground up.
Auto shop, right?
Yes, an auto repair shop in Palm Beach County.
Okay.
Prior to doing that, I was in ophthalmology for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a real estate agent.
And some teaching in there, too.
Yep, and I was an 8th grade science teacher.
You've had a busy and, as I said, a varied career. Your campaign website says, quote, the voice of common sense. What do you mean? Why are you running specifically?
Specifically, I want to be able to reduce taxes for the citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is bottom line. It all comes back to that. We need to identify some wasteful spending and get the budget under control. We have a $6 billion budget in Palm Beach County. That's very robust.
What are constituents, potential constituents, saying to you about the burden?
They're saying that it hurts them. They're already suffering with inflation, high gas prices, high grocery prices. It's just all around, they're suffering.
When you talk about wasteful spending, is there a particular area of complaint you hear about, a particular thing you said that'd be job one that I would tackle?
Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. I just want to help the citizens and relieve some of that burden from them feeling the pinch right now.
You also talk on your website when you were talking about different perspectives, and I'm holding up one of the sheets there. You talk about your priorities. You said county can do more to help small businesses by simplifying planning and zoning. That was a concern. And you said, you talked about affordable living, but first in terms of planning and zoning and regulation, what are you seeing there? What are you hearing? Where do you want to go?
So just when we went to start our business, we had difficulty finding space. Mm-hmm. And then once you found the space, the process seemed to be just unnecessarily difficult.
Also, you talk about the ability to do more in terms of affordable housing. That's a huge issue, and you're in a district that covers such a large area, and we have areas that are very socioeconomically disadvantaged. How do you tackle that? Everybody talks about tackling affordable housing, but it's tough to nail down specifics. Where are you?
Well, right now it does. It starts with reducing costs, and those costs, get relayed onto the person who's either purchasing a home or any of the above aforementioned. And that goes along with reducing taxes, reducing costs, and that gets passed on to the residents.
Do you want more money put toward affordable housing? I mean, how do we create more of it, especially for those so much in need?
So I do not support raising everyone's property taxes, which essentially this new bond going on the ballot will do. I actually would like to support other processes, and reducing the wasteful spending would then free up some money to be able to help with that.
Yeah, again, I want to come back to it because you have several times wasteful spending, a huge chunk of the budget, of course, for law enforcement, other necessary services, fires and the like, fire protection, so on, basic services to serve communities. So where's the area where you say there's a lot of waste going on?
So very specifically, I would never cut budgets for anything that makes our citizens safe. I mean, that is a top priority. People need to be safe in this community. And so when it comes to that, it's just something we would have to potentially maybe put together a citizens task force to tackle and see where that would be possible.
And to be clear, we're not implying that you did want to cut in those areas, but those areas consume so much of the money. So then the question becomes, where else? And you're talking about that. You talked a lot about unchecked local power on your campaign website, saying business owners should not have to beg county commissioners to be open. It's a reference, I assume, to the COVID period when there were so many restrictions. Talk about that and how it seems to have in some ways influenced your decision to run.
So just watching some of the meetings, and not saying that without getting too much into that, we're not going to have enough time to really dig into that. I just thought more could have been done to help them versus it always seemed like them versus us up there, and I'd like to embrace them and try to come together and find solutions to problems.
You thought there were ways to perhaps keep businesses open, to perhaps, in your mind, have more recognition of that need during a very tough period for everybody economically. And I know we heard from a lot of business owners who were straining under the closures and the like. What do you say to those? Say, but it was necessary for the public health. We had sacrifice here for what others argue was a net gain health-wise. It's a tough debate, and the kind hopefully we're not thrust into in the middle of, in a way we were in the depths of COVID, but it's the kind of debates you would have to take on as a representative of that district. How do you find that balance?
Well, that's just it. It's a balance. And so we would just need to recognize businesses and people as individuals.
What else is driving you? In other words, in the first year, let's say you should be elected, and we'll be talking to Michelle McGovern next week, who is your opponent. What would you say the first year, my 3 priorities that I absolutely am going to be a voice to specifically address? You've talked a little bit about it, but give us a broader sense.
Well, currently I want to focus on 2. That would be, I think, taking on a budget in and itself is going to be a large task. And I know I'm going to need help with that. And again, with the help of either a task force, or we can discover or discuss other ways that could be possible. But really break it down for people so they can say, maybe this isn't a priority at this moment. Or maybe we could come back to that at a later time. But really, we need to start decreasing this budget. It has raised over 38% since 2017.
What those will argue, one person's budget cuts, another person's budget benefit. That's a tough call.
And I can agree on a certain level, but I mean, when I operate my small business, what we do is sometimes when things are tough and tight, we have to make necessary decisions.
And you're absolutely convinced there's room, without hitting any of the essential services, as you made very clear, that there is room in that budget to do just that.
Yes.
Let me ask you also one specific topic, and it's an issue that hasn't quite gone away. There have been votes against it, but the GL Homes land swap is not something that's completely off the table. That would allow it to build 1,250 homes on preserved land in the Ag Reserve west of Boca. Your stance on that, do you support that? And again, there have been votes that have kind of put it on the back burner for now, but it will come up again. Where do you stand on that?
I'm for having a discussion about it, but just at a mile-high glance, I am not for the precedent that it sets. It opens up the door of swapping Ag Reserve land going forward, and so I'm not really in favor for that.
And talk about one of your pet peeves, it seemed to be, again, as I looked at a lot of what you talked about, was growth related issues and making our western areas remain places where people want to live. But this is a county that's growing by leaps and bounds. Again, that's going to be a tough balance to sustain. Absolutely,
and smart growth is the way to go. I don't think growth is a bad thing. I just think overgrowth. Nobody wants to be over densely populated with a lot of people. And again, by looking at the budget, we can help even in unincorporated areas right now are struggling with the roads, the infrastructure, and increased traffic. You go and you build a lot of houses and condos, townhomes on that, and what happens? You just get a lot more traffic and a lot more problems. Now, I do recognize supply and demand.
Sure. People want to be out there.
Right. Absolutely. But we need to be smart about it, and we need to make sure that the roadways and the traffic lights and the width of the roads can support what the county is supporting.
And you feel that's out of balance in some ways now?
I do. I think it's...
You talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and you said sometimes we see news headlines, but you've lived that. You said in your own site you've raised your nephew following the tragic loss of her sister to an overdose. You've talked about the real-world issues people go through. You've talked about small business concerns. Again, you talked about a background in business administration. These social issues, you've made a point of talking about that. How do you grapple with those, and what would you say those say? But those are the kind of things where tend to get cut first when budgets are cut. How do you protect those things that are near and dear to you in your personal life as an extension of what you would do on the commission?
Again, I mean, finding room for money isn't necessarily, there are certain things that one might consider wasteful that one wouldn't. That being a priority to me would mean I wouldn't want to start there when cutting a program or something, and not even necessarily cutting. Let's say we could just maybe scale back a little bit for a period of time and hope And when our country starts doing better and we get back in a better place with less than 8.3% inflation, you know, we can revisit those things.
Final thoughts, why you instead of your opponent when it comes down to what is your opening and closing message to your would-be constituents in that huge district, District 6?
So my opponent has supported policies that just keep increasing costs for everyone. And when you keep increasing costs, what happens is it affects the people on fixed incomes more than anyone else. It affects the senior citizens, people that are retired. It affects the lower income families that are living paycheck to paycheck. And those are the policies that she has supported throughout her career in politics.
Ms. McGovern will, of course, have her chance to speak to that when we have her next week, but we appreciate you introducing yourself to our audience and District 6 race for Palm Beach County Commission. Again, the huge district, the biggest one in a county that is growing, as you said, and has a lot of priorities and debates that will be had. We thank you for lending your voice to that discussion, and we'll see you out on the campaign trail.
Thank you for having me.
Migrants on the move, the right message or pawns in political gamesmanship? All sides weigh in next.